Morning, everybody. We'll get started. Declare the meeting open at 9:34 and acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Melville Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between the land waters. The meeting will be run in accordance with the MIDAP regulations. Outstanding orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panel regulations. The meeting has been recorded and live streamed on the MIDAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panel's regulations 2008. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'm Buttonheim. I'm the presiding member for this morning's meeting. I have with me for the text event, the deputy presiding member, John Simon, specialist member, and online we've got Councillor Anthony Woodall and Councillor Daniel Lim. Later on, we'll have Councillors Coghlan and Smart with the City of Nedlands on. There are no members on leave of absence, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the website. Moving to Part B, the City of Melville item. I'm seeking a declaration of due consideration from members. Are all members familiar with the documentation before us this morning? Just raise your hands. Good. Thank you.
Sorry, presiding member. My camera isn't working, but I'm raising my hand here. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Disclosure of interest. Councillors, did this matter go to a City of Melville council meeting?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, no. Are there any disclosures of interest?
No, not for me.
Councillor Lynn?
Nothing from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're moving on to the item, Form 2, that application. There are no presenters for this from the applicant's point of view, but they are in the meeting here to be available for questions. So, from panel members, are there any questions of the applicants? No. Councillor Lim?
Not from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the officers. And that's interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to fix the camera in the back end. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. Do we have the officers? Right. Thank you. Officers, do you want to make any presentation or just happy to take questions?
Happy to take questions today. Thank you.
Our members, are there questions of the officers? I've got a question in relation to the new condition 44, which is about the noise management plan. And at a minimum, it says at a minimum, include details such as hours of operation for the tavern use. And yet in the RAR, you talk about the hours of use being limited. And you'd say further development approval would be required to modify these conditions, but not the noise management plan is to the satisfaction of the city. So presumably those hours could be modified just to the satisfaction of the city. It doesn't need further application.
Yeah, that would be correct. So through submitting a further noise management plan in discussion with the city, if we were satisfied, they likely would not require further development approval.
Should there be, given that's been a concern of some of the local community, should that be a separate condition in terms of the hours of operation?
We did consider limiting the hours specifically in a condition, but decided not to, as it was appropriately managed by the noise management plan and then further by the hours restrictions that are placed on tavern uses more generally.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. No further questions? Thank you, the staff. We'll move on to the item then. There is a recommendation, two-part recommendation, one to accept as a Form 2 and to approve with a new condition and some amended conditions. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Right, Jessica, is there a seconder for that? John, Simon, thank you. Jessica.
Thank you. I am supportive of the proposal. It's an amendment in relation to point 1. I'm satisfied that based on the material we've received that it is consistent, meets that regulation 17 and accordingly can be determined. So noting that there are some these are minor amendments and therefore fulfills that provision. In terms of merit of the proposal, I note that the construction is well underway, the form is already there, and this proposal faces out to the river, and for the changes from my perspective appropriate in the context of its location and surrounding development, which includes some of the other mixed-use developments. And I'm also satisfied that issues of amenity are appropriately addressed through the new condition for noise and noise management plan relating to and connecting to the acoustic report. So from my perspective, these are minor changes. The land use is appropriate in the context of the development.
Thank you. John.
Yes, within the context of the development, I agree. This is a relatively straightforward and minor change to the operations. Any of the issues, I think, have been properly conditioned.
Thank you for this.
I'm happy to just speak briefly. I'm supportive of the application. I think it's relatively minor in the scheme of things. Change to the usages for some of the ground floor tenancies. I think the tavern use, although there have been some concerns around noise, I think the location of it within the development site and also the fact that it, by virtue of being a tavern, usage, its hours of operations are limited in any event. I don't think there'll be major impacts. Also noting it's quite close to the Raffles Hotel in any event. So there is some precedence for that kind of use around this area. Overall, I think it'll enhance the amenity of the development, and I think given the location, and I think I believe it's a wine bar that's been proposed. I don't think there'll be. I think it'll be a relatively sort of high-end establishment, which should reduce any potential impacts on nearby residents. So on that basis, I'm supportive of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, presiding member. Yeah, I agree and echo the same reasons as Councillor Woodall. I think the location of where they're proposing it's close to the Raffles and also towards closer to the end of the river. So I don't see a lot of concerns around changing the use of it. So yeah, I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I too am very supportive of it. The amendments are minor. Proposed use can be managed through conditions. And importantly, it satisfies the intent of the Canning Bridge Activity Centre plan. So with that said, and in agreement with all the comments that they've made, I fully support it. So back to Jessica to wind up the debate. I'll put that all in favour. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not sure if I've got it, but everyone, when you present is a little quicker, and I'm going to have the slides for everyone up on the screen, but you can point into the corner laptop. Thank you.
We will continue with the meeting, and I welcome Councillors Smythe and Tolbert to the table. Thank you. Going through the formal stuff here, the declaration of due consideration. Councillors, has this matter been to a council meeting?
Yes, it has.
Okay, so there is a need for a declaration then.
Thank you. Margaret.
Yes.
I have sent the declaration. These RARs, both of them were presented to the City of Nedlands Corporate Council meeting on the 25th of February under section 2.1.2 of the DAP Code of Conduct 2024. I acknowledge that I am not bound by any previous decision or resolution of the local government I undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to any DAP application before me, which I will consider on its planning merits. So I am confident to participate in the DAP meeting impartially without any prior commitment or bias, and I will consider any application entirely on its merits as presented to the DAP. Thank you.
Councillor Corbett.
Thank you very much. So remember, my declaration is identical. I won't read it out, and I have sent it in a signed copy to the secretary.
Thank you very much. They are accepted. Other members, are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on then to the item itself. The Hampton Road Nedlands mixed use development. We have a couple of presenters, just reminding the presenters that there's a 3-minute limit. And I'll ask you to wind up once the 3 minutes are up. And we'll be followed by questions. So over to Derek and Trent, are you going to do a joint presentation? So,
track on from TFB plan. Well, before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge the Wildlife Project and our people, traditional custodian of the land which we stand, and we recognise their enduring connection to the country, culture, and community, and pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present this proposal, which has been thoughtfully designed to integrate seamlessly with local context and contribute positively to the evolving urban fabric of the area. Given the time frame, I will really quickly flick through the first couple of pages before I get to the main points. Just probably worth keeping in mind, there has been quite a few approval recently on the context, and I'd like to talk to a couple of them that we have done research on. And these are some of the proposal around the context. And firstly, I think I'd like to share a design commits to enhancing streetscape, fostering community engagement and responding sensitively to the surrounding environment. A key feature of the proposal is the introduction of a new communal space around the corner of the site, which have been carefully designed to benefit both the residents and the wider community. We have taken a comparative study of a previous development located less than a block away from 27 Euro Street. In comparison, our proposal features a smaller built form, increased setback, and significantly larger heaps of planting, despite being located on a more urban street. Comparison, this demonstrates a deliberate approach to prioritizing pedestrian experience, neighborhood character, and thoughtful urban integration. Additionally, the project significantly enhances the streetscape and verge activation through a highly engaged street front and creation of new community pathway on the corner of Hampton Road and Hardy Street. This initiative not only enhances the public realm, but also fosters a more vibrant pedestrian-friendly environment that strengthens the social fabric of the neighborhood. And apartments are generously designed with a low density layout of only 2 to 4 units per floor, ensuring privacy, spatial comfort, and boutique residential experience. Importantly, the design achieves 100% cross ventilation and 100% compliant minimum daylight access, resulting in a healthier and more comfortable home that enhances the residents' well-being and sustainability. Material selections have been carefully guided through local architectural context. The building form is expressed through high quality material, delivering a soft and warm aesthetic. Just quickly in summary, this proposal represents a thoughtful contextual response to design, offering an enhanced public realm and high quality living spaces. I respectfully ask the panel to support this proposal, recognizing its crucial to the wider community. Trent.
Thank you, presiding member. I'll just comment briefly on the height and plot ratio, as well as our request for 2 modifications to conditions from the RAR. Firstly, and it's really just feeding off the presentation that Dennis has given, we do have 7-story development with a plot ratio around 0.57 above the acceptable outcome. These variations are critically making the development stack up in challenging market conditions, but of course we must consider the planning objectives. The RAR provides very sound reasoning as to why the objectives are achieved on both those height and plot ratio matters. But just a couple of points to add. Firstly, you can see from this image on the screen that the 7th-story is really well recessed from the street, so it appears very subtle from both Hampton Road. You can just see it peeking out of the top there, as well as Hardy Road. Secondly, as Dennis mentioned, there is an approved development located at 24 Lura Street, which is very, very similar. Most statutory planners will say there's no such thing as precedent in these kind of decisions, but there is consideration of likely future context of the area. And the approval of the opposite corner, actually of this same street block, has helped to paint a picture of what that future character would be. Thirdly, perhaps most importantly, is the context and the lack of impact to surrounding properties. We are adjoined by a medical practice on the south side, as well as a car park further south. There's a right of way to the west, and then 2 street frontages. We're broadly surrounded by commercial development, so this is not 7 stories against a single house kind of context, and 7 stories in a pure town centre environment. Just moving on to our 2 condition requests. Firstly, condition 18 requires 3 public customer bays for the commercial tenancies. So the condition effectively requires the end of the tandem bays to be customer parking and the inner tandem bays to be staff parking. This is not ideal from an operational perspective. We have proposed an alternative condition in the presentation summary for the DAP's consideration, and that simply seeks that the 4 visitor bays are shared between commercial and residential visitors. We believe this is a reasonable outcome given the differing peak times of the commercial and residential land uses. Would these 4 bays cater for every customer that visits the site? The answer is no, probably not, but I put to you that a customer visiting a cafe on Hampton Road does not necessarily expect to be able to drive to the site and park on the premises. There is plenty of on-street parking in Hampton Road, also a little bit on Hardy Road, and there is public parking nearby. There's also a plethora of public transport options. So we believe the shared approach to visitor parking is very sound, and ask you to adopt the amended condition we have proposed. And finally, condition 28 relates to the obscure glazing of the balcony balustrades. We are requesting the condition be deleted. The condition was added through the council meeting, and I assume for privacy purposes. On that front, I'll ask you to consider the context I just outlined, that we are broadly surrounded by commercial properties, and even on the south side where there may be future development, all those balconies are screened and in accordance with the visual privacy requirements of the R codes. So on those grounds, we would ask for the deletion of that condition. Thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Questions from panel members?
Could I? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the overall design. I'm going to be a bit of a pain and drill down to a very what might seem to be a minor point, but I consider a livability point, and that's apartments 2B. I'll bring that plan up. What I'm referring to this map. The first one.
Yep.
Yeah. There's 2 apartments there. I just consider that the arrangement of where the toilet is practically in the kitchen, and I just think that that's not desirable. Living arrangement, and I would request that not to stop this, but if we could give some consideration to the configuration of that, or make some explanation about it. It is both those apartments.
Sure, I can talk a little bit through it. I suppose with the kitchen arrangement, it's a really generous kitchen that is laid out, and technically it's situated behind the kitchen itself. The entry does have a 1-by-1 look right next to the kitchen itself, and we're more than happy to give a bit more consideration through the design development process to make the experience a little bit better than what you suggested.
Yeah, as I said earlier, tongue in cheek, it looks like you're just about scrambling your eggs by sitting on the toilet. It's so close, so I would appreciate that some consideration is made for that. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to bring it up.
Thanks. Any further questions? Questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. The officers. Opposed to making presentation.
Yeah, we can speak briefly to the 2 conditions, which
Yes,
the
yes,
applicant has requested to be amended. I suppose the easy one is condition 28. Yes, that was imposed by council. I think the intent of the condition is to reduce perceived overlooking. There is no actual overlooking in accordance with the R codes. So if MIDAP choose to take that off, we have no concerns from a technical perspective. In relation to condition 18, which is the parking. So the development actually proposes a shortfall of 7 parking bays, which we are generally 41 in general, given the 6 commercial bays. However, the applicant has stated that the 6 commercial bays are purely for staff only, which is something that we disagree with, given that there are existing problems and congestion with parking on Hampton Road. So as a compromise, we think that the 3 bays to the rear of the tandem should be allocated to customer parking, and then the other 3 can be for staff parking. The remaining 4 are visitor parking for the residential component. Should the condition be tweaked in its wording, that's fine, but we do believe that not all 6 bays should be purely for staff.
Questions of the officers?
How would that work in practice? Because you've got commercial people coming in and out, you've got people who are not related to you parking behind them. How is it going to work in practice? Doesn't seem to be it looks to me to be a recipe for conflict.
Yeah, it's definitely not an ideal situation. However, we can see it as someone who works in the cafe might be there the entire day, so can park in the bay back, and then customers can come and go from on. That's directly adjacent to the lane.
Yeah, but somebody's in the commercial suite, maybe in and out of them as well.
It could be, I suppose that's a management issue.
Any questions? Right, we'll move to the items. I'm going to seek a move and second before published. Motion for approval. Is there a mover for it? Smart, thank you. Is there a seconder? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you. This development is an example of what the city has been putting forward as the new precinct design and form. So we were at council pleased to wave this through on the officer's recommendation, except for the fostered class situation. So otherwise, I'm pleased to put this forward for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Manchester.
Thank you. This development is excellent development. So I know that the design review and further reviews undertaken by the chair has provided very positive comments in relation to the proposal. Super supported all the elements. I also note that the report indicates that it's consistent with the planning framework and the scheme provisions as well as the additional requirements, including the Hampton Political Precinct LPP 5.14. The developments exceptionally well presented to the street, particularly at the ground level. The interaction and the design of it with both cafe and commercial, orientating out to the street and incorporating a substantial landscaping at the street would be an enormous positive improvement to that particular area. It is a vast difference to what's on the site currently, and it will obviously form part of the character and emerging character and context of the area. The overall development functions exceptionally, given that it has 3 points of interaction with the public domain, including the rear lanes of both streets. The overall layout of the development has generous sized dwellings. Interestingly enough, quite a low number of dwellings in the development, something that intrigues me. It is a very good development, I suppose. There has been a number of challenges in numbers of units in terms of getting developments off the ground. This is an exceptional development. I'm supportive of the proposal as it's been provided. I will, however, seek to move an amendment to the canopy structure. It's amendment 1, and I seek to delete condition 28. I'm satisfied. Might be there's a second one for my reasons.
John, thank you. Second. So,
I'm satisfied that based on the material presented, including the responses in today's meeting, that the requirements of the design meet the provisions, and that this is an intention rather than around relating to perception, perceived overlooking. And I'm comfortable that it's not required in relation to the proposal.
John, the second.
Yes, look, I can see no real purpose to this condition at all. We impose these sorts of things when there is an actual overlooking, and I think the question of perceived overlooking is a peculiar one. All of these balconies face a public thoroughfare, either the lane or the street. I think I take the proponent's point that the aesthetic of this particular design, this particular project, does require or would actually be diminished if we ended up with anything except clear glass there. So I just can see no purpose to this at all. So I think it should be.
Further speakers.
Speak against the amendment. And can I just check? I couldn't hear it. This is the amendment about frosted glass.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, the frosted glass has been an issue that continues to come into our council meetings, and if only life was a red that we see in the architecture of design, but it's not. And what we're seeing more and more is that the balconies become full of everyone's outdoor life activities, including washing, etc., and bites and barbecues, and they actually all of this household paraphernalia is what we see from the street. It's not the render that we're seeing in the design, and these the frosted glass doesn't give a little bit of pushback, I suppose, for the visual streetscape for that very busy household clutter that is hanging over into the amenity and visual environment for the community. So that's what it's only a very small attempt, but that's what it is being asked for.
Thank you, Councillor. I support the deletion of this condition. I think, while I understand Councillor Smyth's concerns, these issues ought to be managed by a strata management company. In this case, I think can be, because we have quite generous apartments in terms of size and quite generous storerooms for the apartments. So that clutter ought to be able to be stored elsewhere. So I support the reasons for deletion to design integrity and the fact that it's only perceived. So back to the mover, to everyone for debate.
I have no further comments.
Put that amendment, all in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. We'll still with you. My comments on the development is that both scale is appropriate within the context of the site, though it is as intended for 150 metres south of the community medical precinct. There's a significant amount of activity that goes on there, and in that the road is pretty busy, including quite extensive public transport travels down it. In terms of the variations both in ratio and I think they're appropriate in the context of the site and the assessments been undertaken and the design of the proposal. Thank you. Speakers. Speakers.
Yes, look, I very much like this development. I particularly like the way in which there's an implied trade-off here between additional height, which I think has been handled really skillfully against a pretty substantial increase in deep soil planting and landscaping. And I think this is a very good example which can usefully be looked at by the city in other locations. So I think the obsession with height as a measure and as a limit really starts to make the ability for this type of thing where you've got very substantially more deep soil planting more difficult to do, and I think it's been achieved very nicely in this case. So I commend that aspect of the design. I think generally with a few tweaks on internal layout and so on, which might be you'd expect in design development, I think the general architecture is very good and it suits very well. I would like to propose an amendment to condition 18, which is as suggested by the proponent, prior to occupation limit of 4 parking bays to be allocated as parking generally, which would imply visitor parking generally for either commercial or residential visitors. Okay, I move that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeking a second. Okay. Yes, thank you. John.
Thank you. Look, I take a couple of points here. First of all, I think that putting parking in a tandem bay really is unworkable. The possibility of conflict is there. I don't think we should be in the business of putting stuff in place which really we can see a problem in the future. I think that in a de facto way, if there's 6 bays, if there's demand for 6 commercial bays by staff, then they'll be used straight away anyway. So I think practically it's not going to be much of a I think the point that the demand for visitor parking, again, residential as against customers of commercial tenancies, is a good one that they do have it at different times of the day. And also, I think we're in a location which increasingly, and this is not going to be the last time, increasingly parking generally is going to be under 4 years is at a premium. I mean, it gets back to the planning solution, which is to provide more public transport. I think this is already well served by public transport. Look, for those reasons, I think while it might be preferable to have more parking, I think in this case it's just not practical. And I think the way that this is formatted is quite expensive.
Just before we move on to the second comment, just want to clarify, you put the word generally in a couple of locations. And more conversion.
No.
You're moving as
I'm moving as per that.
Okay, just.
I support the comments that have been made by the mover. I would make the oppositional comments somewhat similar in that in terms of staff parking, I do think it's appropriate that the parking for staff those will be there for long periods of time is provided and has that ability to be used in that manner. The movement of visitors has a much more fluid arrangement. I also note that the area has a mix of uses. There is plenty of parking on the street. I know there is limitations to parking on the street. There is also parking in and around the Nedlands precinct, and there is substantial public transport. Like any of these higher interactive activity centres, parking is at a premium. People will use the transport as is expected in these busy areas. Opinion that in this particular case, the ability for the dedication of parking for those that be there for long periods of time, as well as the flexibility for residents to use it after hours is appropriate.
I would just like some clarification. Condition 18, you're amending it or not amending it?
Amending it.
Amending it 2
Yes.
As requested by.
Yes.
as requested.
That's correct.
No, I've got that.
And for the speakers, I agree with the requested amendment. Just see confusion reigning when you try and share tandem bays in that way, so it's a good solution for what might have been brought up. Further to say, so back to Connors.
No.
Okay, I'll put the amendment, all in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Still.
No, I think, as I said, this is a very nice development. I think it's going to be well. It'll be a very good addition to this precinct, and set a nice benchmark for other development along here.
Thank you. Further speakers? I fully support, so I agree with all the comments that have been made. Well resolved solution for that location. There are some minor variations being sought, such as the depth of the tenancy, which is operation street setback, but these variations are not significant in my mind, and they're offset by the quality of the design and the landscaping, deep soil landscaping. This is an ideal development for this location, so I fully support it. Back to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, I continue to support the motion as amended, with the 2 amendments being to do with the frosted glass being removed, and also the parking arrangements changed as amended. So thank you. I recommend this to you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion as amended. All in favour? Unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4.1. We have some presenters. We have category of familiar material, including the presentation. So, 9 minutes, counting the minutes. Over to you then. No,
Okay, thanks, Clayton. Thanks, panel members. My name is Paul Simpson. I'm representing ARIA Land. ARIA is the consultant to Blue Waves. Blue Waves is the developer of this site and other sites in Broadway at 139 and 5 Hillway, and also the other development, 95 Broadway. The panel may be aware that 2 of those buildings have been completed a year or so ago, and dozens of people are happily living in those developments. In fact, they both won their respective divisions of the Master Builders Association Awards this year for the best developments of the state. The panel may be aware that this development, subject of the Form 2DA application for today, was in fact approved by this panel back in September as a Form 1. In December, almost on the identical site 20 metres away at number 95 Broadway, was also approved by this panel by a vote of 4-1. The building that we've put forward today is identical to the one that was approved by the council in September, and very similar to the one that was approved in December. The only difference being, and this is Form 2 that we're applying today, not a Form 1. The only difference being that we change it from 45 apartments to 60 apartments. The height, side setbacks, the rear setbacks, the front setbacks, the deep soil area, the parking, they're all identical to what's already been approved. All we've done is shuffle the walls to change it from 45 apartments to 60 apartments, and this is really addressing the affordability issue and we've been able to incorporate 20 studio apartments, which are going to be priced at 550 to 650,000. And this is quite unique in the western suburbs. That's stamp duty on houses in Bedford Grove, and you'll be able to buy an apartment in the western suburbs at these prices. We're just seeking the panel's approval of what's already been approved for another site 20 metres away. We respect the city has raised the differences between what's been requested and the town planning, which are the same issues that the city raised in its RAR for the other two developments which have been approved. Whilst we respect those, we're trying to do our best to comply with the town plan as much as we can, as we did for the previous two developments. We hope to get panel support again today. Dan addressing the town planning issues, and Ben will handle the architectural ones. I think everything else is in the submission that I put in last week. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Ben. Ben.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'll just preface that this presentation does reiterate many of the same points in support of the previous proposal for this site and that was approved in September 24, and also similar commentary to that made in relation to the proposed development for 95 Broadway, approved in December, as Paul highlights. They're almost identical, save for the facade treatment. So the design is a response to existing character and emerging street context. It's a contemporary translation of the existing tapestry of the street, and it takes advantage of the opportunity to create a more active ground plane, enlivened by shop fronts, entry lobbies and rich planting. And then overlooking the street, a varied palette of quality materials, screening and balconies creates passive surveillance and will enliven the area's sense of place and community. The scale and form of the proposal is essentially unchanged from the previous approval and consistent with neighbouring schemes, very obviously 93 to 95 Broadway, that have been approved by the panel. And as we've demonstrated prior with these kind of massing diagrams to show how the proposal relates to what's approvable, it's broadly within those constraints. And as Paul mentioned, we haven't really changed significantly from what was approved previously. And so we've also then, just to reiterate what we've shown previously, these views moving up and down the street from the southerly direction and the northerly direction, just to demonstrate the impact and the relative height in terms of adjacent developments. And as can be seen, it's very much in keeping with that emerging context. And then just to remind the panel of setback analysis that we have previously provided to show that we are well within the setbacks, broadly speaking. There are some obviously encroachments and some that are further in from the setbacks, which is all really related to the functional planning and to make sure that we have livable apartments. Minimising overlooking to the rear setback is been prioritised and addressed through deep soil planting on that western boundary, and essentially nothing has changed from what was previously approved in that regard. And that just illustrates that point. The landscape planning is shown very much that mature planting along the western boundary will provide additional levels of screening and privacy. And from an overshadowing point of view, we're really essentially within the exact same kind of parameters of what was actually the approval massing form. So really, essentially, the only thing that has changed is the number of dwellings on this site, which, as Paul has said, has gone up considerably, and that really is in recognition of significant housing challenges that we currently face in the state, and that this is focused very much on providing more diversity and affordability in the dwelling mix, and demonstrating that, you know, what is perceived as a high density development actually protects the surrounding context by creating more affordable product for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good morning, panel members, and thank you for this opportunity to present in support of the approval of this Form 2 application. This predominantly residential building was approved by this panel in September last year, and today's application is with the seeks to make some minor changes, primarily replanning the internal apartment configurations to change from 45 to 60 apartments, including the introduction of some affordable studio apartment types, whilst maintaining a broad mix of typologies in an effort to provide housing choice within city Nedlands. Your approval today is respectfully requested, and I focus my deputation on the city's reasons for deferral of the city in the RAR. As an overarching comment, I will respectfully suggest that items previously approved by the panel ought not to be open for reconsideration as part of this Form 2 application. With reference to the presentation, just to modify it then, on page 21 of this, this demonstrates how the street setbacks are proposed to be increased for the majority of the building from 2.5 metres to 4 metres across levels 3, 4, 5 and 6. And then at the uppermost level, which is not readily visible from the pedestrian scale, level 7 is proposed to be brought forward towards the street to an from an 8.6 metre setback to 7 metres, whilst this still retains its recessed form in the context of the footprint below. Reason for deferral 2, again on page 21 of the Hassel presentation, the rear setbacks are proposed to be increased for the majority of the building from 8.4 to 8.8 metres at level 1, and then from 6.8 to 6.9 metres to 7.5 metres at levels 3 to 6. At the uppermost level, the approved 12 metre setback is proposed to be reduced, and this comes back to 9.4 metres. This still achieves a significant building separation from the boundary and is consistent with the R Code's building separation acceptable outcome, which is 9 metres. As for side setbacks, page 20 of the presentation demonstrated a greater degree of architectural and visual interest to the side elevations in the form of greater articulation, where the building now has these projecting tapering forms, while still maintaining broad consistency with the approved development. To the south, you can see that side-by-side comparison. It's this tapering form, which comprises a relatively small portion of the entirety of the side elevation, that represents the reduced setback. This is to a minimum of 2.1 metres, because it's tapering in form and then increases back to 4 metres. So there's a 4 metre setback to the main building line to the side elevations. And the design still retains that central recess or void between the street facing and the rear facing forms of the building. So with reference to the alternate recommendation, which I appreciate is on the table, condition 18, we respectfully request that this not be imposed for approval today. On to visitor parking. Reason for deferral number 4. There are a total of 7 residential visitor car bays being proposed. This represents a shortfall of 2 bays from the acceptable outcomes of the residential design codes. It's our view that this is a minor shortfall and ought to be considered appropriate on the basis that the subject site is well located, roadways provided with a number of public transport options, bus routes, and there is extensive on-street parking across the locality. So with reference to the alternate recommendation, condition 21, we would respectfully request that this refers to 7 residential visitor bays. Reason for deferral number 5 deals with balcony sizes. The acceptable outcome variation that we are proposing is only to the dimension aspect of some of the 2-bedroom apartments, where we're proposing a 2 metre balcony dimension in lieu of 2.4 metres. All of these balconies still have the minimum area of 10 square metres. These apartments are not intended as dual key apartments, as being referenced in the city's report. They're intended for intergenerational living, but they will not be striped titled. These balconies are considered to be sufficient for their intended future occupants and complement the generous internal living spaces, which has been acknowledged in the city's report. So in closing this morning, legally to scale, massing, form and use of the proposed development. I believe it has previously been approved by this panel. The proposed changes today are considered minor in nature, whilst maintaining broad consistency with the approval from September, as well as the highly similar approval at 95 Broadway, which both Paul and Ben just referred to, which was approved by this panel in December. This proposal delivers increased density in a challenging market with a design that is efficient and cleverly responds to the surrounding context. This is considered to be contextually appropriate for Broadway, and your approval today is respectfully requested.
Thank you. Questions or sentences?
I'm not sure who would like to answer it, probably Mr. Simpson. You're saying delivering dwelling diversity and affordability, and you've gone to now 60 apartments, which is almost double what the first DA was. You've actually been packaging it now as affordability, and we have heard previously when you talked about how Rivian, both the builder and the developer, lost a substantial amount of money. I know the figure, but I'm not going to repeat it here because we're actually looking at this development, not previous developments. But can you just expand about the studio apartments and a little bit of why you think that's actually acceptable? And in this market, where's it coming from?
Thank you, Councillor. The issue is affordability. Obviously, the bigger the apartment, the more expensive it is. The sale of the other apartments further down the street at 139 Broadway in particular, and in fact the original sales off the plan of these two sites at 95 and 789, we found there was a lot of resistance. Anything over about $1.5 million. $2 million was it. But so what we've tried to do, we talked to our selling agents every Tuesday at 9:30 for the last 5 years, and they're in turn trying to sell apartments and our developments and others, and they know the market well. We have looked at the demand from people in the country, and also people who are going to UWA and working at QE2 Medical Centre, and we know that there's going to be good demand for these lower priced apartments. There's people, in fact, in Rivian, some of the owners there have spoken to me originally from Albany, and they, I told them about this development further up the street in small house, and they said, I wish that was available 5 years ago. I would have bought a 2-bedroom apartment there and then another studio, and our sons at UWA, he could have lived in the studio and we could have lived there, and then we could have subsequently rented out that apartment, or he could have stayed in it until we got married or whatever. So it all comes down to affordability, and there's, as I mentioned earlier on, and through your own experience, where can you buy anything in the western suburbs for $500,000 or $600,000? You can't. All of us, my kids grew up in that area, and they can't afford to live there anymore. Of course, the cheapest piece of land is $2 million to get a quarter-acre site, or if you can get something smaller and cheaper, at maybe $700,000 or $800,000 for a small piece of land, then you've got to build on it. So, and we know about the housing crisis, we know about affordability generally, and young people just can't afford to be spending $1.5 million on a house, and their parents certainly don't want to living there forever. So in our household anyway, but so they've moved out, and they've in fact they've left Western Australia. But so what we do know from dealing with buyers every day for the last 5 years, it all comes down to what people can afford. And these 20 apartments will be probably the first ones to be sold, to be snapped up. Of course, there's nothing within Northbridge to get someone from well, in fact, I'm not even sure to get it there. This is quite a unique program. And for overseas students from Asia and elsewhere who are studying at UWA, or in fact, we'll be contacting the various private schools in the western suburbs that have borders there. And in fact, one of the residents in in Rivian development, 139, the owners live in Hong Kong. They've got a son at Christchurch, and they bought an apartment there so they can live when they come down to visit him, and he can actually use them in the weekends. But they don't want to have $1.5 or $2 million tied up in that. They like, if it's only 500,000 or 600,000, makes a lot of sense. So certainly the boarding houses will be very interested in offering this to the country and overseas owners as a base for in the city instead of having to spend 2 or 3 times that. So we've responded to this. We're Bay, who is the developer of Ninehampton, he's a friend of ours, and he was quite interested in this concept and wondering why he didn't introduce himself at Ninehampton. So it's a great concept, and it'll go down well, and really would appreciate your support and acknowledge that tonight in the market at the moment.
Oh, I've got one other. Could you expand on the comment you made about strata, please?
Oh, can I expand on that? Of course, it's sorry. This is another area that we've identified, this intergenerational living. Now, under the town planning, and we respect the city's differentiation here, but under the town planning, there isn't a section which is designed for intergenerational living. It's basically dual key living. And there are a few dual key apartments being provided around the city, but this isn't, it may look like a dual key apartment. We're designing this for intergeneration. People my age and older have got parents who don't necessarily want to go into a nursing home, and sometimes a lot of families are happy to have the parent, particularly if it's a widowed parent, come and live with them. But those people also want their privacy, they want their own cooking area perhaps, and they don't want to be sort of living with their kids full time. They like separation. So we've got 8 of these apartments in the building. It's specifically designed to cater for that. So it looks like a 2-bedroom dual key apartment. It's one entry door, and then there's another door into what looks like a studio apartment, and then another. The rest of it goes to another 1-bedroom apartment. So it looked like a studio or a 1-bedder or a 2-bedder dual key. But in fact, we're calling it intergenerational because we're specifically designing for people who want to have one of their parents, or in fact even a student who wants to have their own privacy, their own cooking facilities, and the like. So the comment that Dan made about not being separate strata, they're all on one strata title. Each one of those 8 apartments is, whilst it's so it's not a dual key, it's one strata. The separate room can't be sold off because it's on one strata type. So that was the reference. So, answer to what you're going to say?
Just as a follow-up, could they be strata in the future?
Well, we're not proposing that they are on sale, but that's the intent of that particular apartment as a product to meet particular segment of the market. So we don't continue that. It makes the city of Nedlands sense that when it comes to issuing the built strata approval for the building once it's completed. So the city will have the power to issue a single strata title for that apartment and not to issue 2 separate strata titles. But we will propose that.
Thank you. Further questions? John.
Parking, you've got 5 bays in front of the security gate and 2 behind it. He would like an extra 2 that would presumably be next door, that'd be behind the security gate. If they were not dedicated visitors, what would they be allocated to the unit?
Yeah, that's how they're currently proposed. That's supposed to be allocated to the apartment.
Okay, so how many bays do you have there now for residents, please?
55.
55. Or how many apartments?
60. Yeah, we know from experience from the in fact in the Rivian building further down at 139, all of the apartments there have got they're all 2 and 3 bedders, and they've all got minimum 2 parking bays, and 3 apartments have got 3 bays. The car park is half empty, full, at any one time. A lot of people, some people don't have a car at all. course, we're right on the cat bus service, close to UWA. A number of people who live there, actually professors at UWA, and they just walk or ride a bike to work. In fact, 4 of the people live there are in UWA. And a lot of people that are husband and wife, they just have the one car, and so they've got one parking bay sitting there. So the average number of cars in that development is less than 1 car per couple. Now, when we're talking studio apartments where people are trying to minimise the amount of money spending on their dwelling, we know that there won't be a high demand for parking bays for someone. And for us to provide another bay for each of those apartments, we really have to put another basement in. And the building is already teetering on uncommercial as it is. We have to get it approved that we can't afford another $2 million basement. So and in fact, that's the risk of the developer. If people don't buy the apartments, of course, there's some parking bay, and that's the developer's problem. But we know that if people are only spending 550 or 60,000 on a studio, and you've got a cat bus 50 metres away, and great ride sharing, plus also our experience in other developments in the same street, we know that's more than enough parking.
Just so, sorry, John, if I could just have the full answer
on the
numbers.
behind. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just with reference to page 2 of the city's report, and there's a quite helpful comparison table. Just in terms of the numbers that identified, there are 5 residential visitor parking bays as part of the approved development, proposing to go to 7 as part of this development. So acknowledging that it is a shortfall from the PR code's acceptable outcomes, but in terms of the comparison from the approval, from 5 to 7.
So your current approval is 5.
Yeah.
So, to your point about relative lack of demand, if the city wants an extra 2 bays, what's your argument against that? Because you're almost arguing against it.
Well, we're also aware of how much the current visitor bay situation is used in the other developments, and without doing surveys, but just I live in Rivian, I know what the visitor parking bay situation is in that building, and most of the bays, the 6 bays there, empty most of the time. In fact, barring tradesmen being there a bit after the building was completed, the bays are rarely used. We're seeing it when they are used. It's you've got different categories. You've got people who may be visiting, dropping something off during the day, but most of the usage is at night and weekends. And there's a lot of on-street parking on nights and weekends, delivery people tend to just park up front and run in. And as was mentioned in the 9 Hampton Road presentation, we find that people aren't necessarily using visitor parking bays because of as much. If you're not expecting to get on-site parking in the building, of course, the on the street situation. So what we're seeing, John, is that of course, like Rivian, this building has got 2 or 3 bus services, the free purple cat bus into the city right out front. And whilst that my comments apply to the residents, they also apply to visitors. So a lot of people are using rideshare or in the evenings in particular, and weekends parking on the street. And then there's so Dan said there were 5 bays before, there's 7 bays now. So we think there's more than adequate. John, I'd like to provide another 2 bays, but it's just getting very difficult to, without repositioning the security gate, to provide any more outside the gate. It's already a management issue for those 2 inside the gate. So,
and there's no food and bev in this development, so there's
no, the commercial is only 80 square metres from memory, and that'll be typically taken up by a consultant or an architect or a lawyer or somebody, and who doesn't necessarily as you say, it's not like it is to be, where you get a lot of visitors.
I've got a question, it's a design question. It's in relation to balconies size, and I note that I'm referring to the dual key apartments or intergeneration homes that you refer to. On the previous approval, the one in September, the proposal had a dual key intergeneration in a similar design that we have on this plan, with a balcony narrow but wide at 2.7. And this proposal has the same dual key also facing Broadway. My question is, if you're looking at levels 3 and 4 on your current plan, this application, form 2 application, and you look at the 2x2 that faces Broadway, the adjoining properties are only at 1 there with a much wider balcony. I'd be interested in your design approach. It's basically about size of balcony relative to size of unit. And I note that this occurs also as you roll up to level 5. And I'd be interested in the design approach on that, noting that they are the smallest of balcony, but the units that actually adjoin them, particularly on levels 3 and 4, are actually a smaller unit, but a bigger, more generous balcony. And I'm interested in that both in the context of size of apartment, as well as your earlier comments about intergenerational living. Could you provide some comments on that in relation to design?
Yeah, well, I would say in the first instance that the envelope that we have, and bearing in mind we had a previous design and we have adapted that design to increase the number of dwellings from 45 up to 60, and so that presents some certain, some immediate constraints about what we can actually do within, the approval envelope, and what we can do with the structure and cause and the kind of the grid, and fundamentally it means that there are certain nice to haves or ideal scenarios that we have to make compromises on. So I completely take the point that logically a larger apartment would probably desire a slightly larger balcony. But to be honest with you, the constraints of the planning led us to have to make some kind of decisions about where we prioritize space, and so making a functional kind of apartment internally sort of took precedent over what can be done on the balcony, and it becomes very difficult to offset balcony widths between the two apartments in terms of where your structural lines are and that sort of thing. And I think the reality is that it would be ideal to have a larger balcony, but we're still within I think what is acceptable, and ultimately it comes down to there is a sort of developer's risk there around if that apartment isn't favourable to certain buyers from the point of view of the balcony size, then that is a risk that the developer has to kind of take on board.
I could add to that, and in that the developer has to have that risk, but we're finding that some people are balcony people who want to have a barbie out there and sit out there, and there are other people who never use a balcony, and so that's a developer's risk. That one has a small balcony, those do. The reason that the one better beside it is the wider balcony is because the balcony is across both the living area and bedroom, and this one's only across the living area. That's our risk. We're dependent upon finding buyers who have to have a smaller balcony.
Yes, one further question. With the wing walls that are a bit of change from the previous approval, do you have any comments, design or planning comments, on what you say? You provide a commentary in your submission. You talk about it in the context of condition 18. But I'm interested in what I didn't read here is what do you say about any amenity impact associated with that change? And I note that the little wing wall has it's similar to the ones already built down there.
It is, yes, Melville,
Yeah.
which Faye developed as well. Yeah, we didn't steal any ideas from Faye, but if he was here, he may agree with that. But yeah, the amenity that is provided, that those two little wings actually bring in great easterly light in the morning to the ones on Broadway, and afternoon sunset light into the respective rooms in the afternoon, into the bedrooms on the western side and into the kitchens on the eastern side. They also articulate the northern and southern facades nicely, the same way as Vista and Broadway does. And when you look at the depth of those apartments, 15 metres or more long, the kitchen on the Broadway side would be suffering a little bit in terms of light, so on the Broadway side, it's great that we're able to introduce that light into the kitchen and into the bedroom on the western side.
And do you have any comments in this particular on that particular issue, and it's referred to in the RA, about, do you have any further comments about amenity impacts in relation to adjoining property? Your comments talked about design responding to the context and ameliorating the bulk and scale of adjoining property. I'm interested in your comments about impact on amenity of adjoining developments, and I'm only really talking about that's the change from the plans that were.
I think in the context of the depth of the site and the depth of the building, it's a relatively small projection in the context of the site elevation of the building. I actually think it does introduce articulation in terms of form, but also materiality, in the sense that there is a combination of windows and walls to that side. There is still a setback provided to the main building line, and when it's read in combination with I've called it the void, or the central break, the recess between the street facing and the rear facing apartments, I actually think this is a highly articulated side elevation to the neighbouring properties. Side by side street view that was included on the Hassel presentation demonstrated that it's quite a consistent level of setback between the two buildings. If we're looking to the south and then looking to the north, this is a duplex or triplex property which is orientated to its north. So it really is the service side and car parking, under roof car parking area that is located towards the common boundary to our north. So any views from to our north are really over the roof of that neighbouring group building.
Just, I'd answer that specific point. Sorry, sorry. Can you just address your concerns with condition 18? Because that's
yep. So condition 18, I understand, has been recommended due to the acceptable outcomes of barcodes and the 3 metre visual privacy distance that the barcode sets as a default. The concern in obscuring the glazing would be the negative amenity impact for future occupants of this development. We think the cone of vision encroachment is fairly large or fairly minor, that the city's identified as a 0.4 metre cone of vision incursion. For the reasons I mentioned previously, I think that is an acceptable compromise for the neighbour to the north and again for the neighbour to the south. So, screening these windows.
So you've got some of those windows facing north and south, which is fine, but some are facing directly onto the boundary next door at 2.6 metres. What would the condition on those be? Where would the silver be?
Oh, that's why I read the condition. It would be the condition provides two options. Provides for
Yeah, well, asking what your design intentions.
design intent.
Well, what, where's the sill? Where are they?
Yeah, so well, I mean, the
Are
vertical,
they high level or are they at 900?
they would most likely be at 900,
Yeah.
you know, because then you can obviously put a bench or
So either way, they're about 900.
yeah, so it may be a vertical strip of glass, but the lower portion being obscured, and then you have a transfer 900.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
not,
some of those windows face to the street or to the rear, and that's one condition, but some face directly across there, that's a different condition.
Yeah.
The question is, are you treating them differently?
yeah, I think we would probably like to those that are facing the street. Sorry. So those that are facing the street, there's a kitchen bench top that runs into them, so they inevitably have to have a transom. But they may still read as a full height piece of glass with you. We can accept obviously that those where there's a bedroom and it's directly at the boundary. In an ideal world, that would be a full height bit of glass. But if there's a concern that's providing too much vision, we would accept that a 900 transom would be okay. Just visually, it would just read as a vertical strip of glass.
Yes, I understand, but you have a 1600 transom.
1600 or 900?
No, you've got one there and you've got 1600.
Yeah, so the full height of the window is about.
Above that, it's clear. Yeah.
Questions?
Thank you. Look, my question is about the RAR before us is for recommended by council and administration is for a deferral. So I would like to know why you had any issues with negotiating what the planners are asking, and we've got any concerns, I suppose, as to why they're asking for more time. Have you had unresolved issues, or why is it that they're asking for more time? You believe? Because I'm hearing on the run here today that there's detailed issues. When this came to council, we talked about the creep in plot ratio from 2.79 to 2.91, which notwithstanding that there was already a generous approval from what the plot ratio is, for the year it is. So why can't you come to an agreement with what you want? Why is there this tension that the administration want more time?
I mean, I can't.
Particularly considering that we've had before us in our papers a request for a refusal. It's in the papers as well, an option for refusal. Wouldn't it be better to work with this deferral and not get a refusal?
I can't speak to specifically why the city has recommended a deferral for more time, but referring back to my deputation, I mean, a number of these reasons suggested for the deferral, to my reading, look to revisit matters that have already been approved as part of the original application, which I do not believe is appropriate for the Form 2 application, as I spoke to in my deputation. So I can refer back to those, but they talk about streetscape, that street setback, where we are proposing to increase the street setback for the majority of the levels, with the exception of level 7. Deferral reason 2 talks to the rear setback, which we are proposing to increase for the majority of the levels. So I don't believe it's appropriate to defer the application to revisit those items that and in fact the proposal to increase setbacks for those particular items. And I appreciate the DAP Executive Director has asked for alternate recommendations, both for approval and for refusal. I believe are here to assist the panel in its decision making for the reasons I set out in my deputation and as to Paul and in the presentation. We have an approval here. These minor amendments are essentially seeking to change the approval here at 8789 Broadway to be very similar to the building that was approved at 95 Broadway in December. So I believe there is enough information for the panel to make a decision. I don't believe the deferral is appropriate or warranted. I don't believe there is a lack of information. I think it's all here, and the reasons I put forward we're actually making, dare I say, improvements to the design in respect of some setback compliances, because some of the setbacks are actually increasing, and we're managing to achieve greater apartment yield and growth.
Thank you. I'll ask the same question on the
Yes,
administration.
yes, thank you. Any further questions? No. No, okay, thank you, gentlemen. Move to the office. Do you want to make any?
We use for questions. I will make a comment with respect to the application. Hearing a component saying that development is nearly identical through it is, I guess, from the perspective of external appearance, size and bulk and scale. But we do have, with this new proposal, an increase in plot ratio, increase in the number of dwellings. So the internal makeup of the development has changed significantly from 45 to 60 dwellings. And part of it's reduced from 71 to 64. One of the points I did want to make, it's an important one in relation to this parking. One of the challenges we have with this particular development, I hope this is certainly subscribed to what the proponent mentioned about this parking not being used. We've got 60 residential apartments. 7 bays will be used. I think there's no question about it. And my concern is that even with the previous approval, when 5 bays were required, that would give the required amount of parking. Is that we've got an accumulative effect of approving developments below this parking. And when you have an accumulative effect of developments being approved with a lack of this parking, it creates a big problem in an area. So one of my concerns is that 9 bays is very much suitable for this particular development, particularly given the number of dwellings that have increased as part of this development. And it's one of the factors that the city would like to see addressed in this development in particular.
Thank you. I'll move to questions.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go to the requirement for deferral and what you hope to achieve in that deferral period, and what comment you have on the comment by the proponent that possibly you're revisiting past approval rather than staying in the realm of the Form 2. So if you could elaborate on what negotiation you hope to do in that deferral period, and have you had difficulties in attempting to already go through that negotiation?
Look, I think I'll speak briefly to Dylan, but I think there are a number of issues that need to be addressed, and I think we've outlined that in the recommendation of deferral and even in the alternative recommendation. So there number of issues that do need to be addressed, and I guess we're not confident at this stage that we can just condition it away and have plans addressed, and then later on down the track, we've heard from the proponent, for example, that increasing the number of bays from 7 visitor bays from 7 to 9 will be a challenge. So, and that's a particular matter that the city wants addressed. So if it is an issue and if it's supported by this panel, it's more prudent to have the plans actually drawn up properly and investigated and done, and then back to this group for approval rather than conditioning it away. You might have problems in actually providing, you know, the 9 bays over 7. So we're just not confident at this stage that all the matters that we've addressed can be just conditioned off without some decent changes to the proposed development. And I guess it's also better practice that if these matters are addressed, plans are amended, and then a proposal is put to this panel with all these matters resolved, and then it becomes a pretty easy approval for the panel. And in saying that, it minimises any issues that we might encounter down the track, that if we were to defer, if we were to approve these conditions, and then we problems in achieving what we're seeking. So I think we're not confident at this stage that we can just condition away the development. We would like to see amended plans to address these issues.
Just as a follow-up to that, you accept though that some of the reasons for deferral are revisiting things that have already been approved, not part of the Form 2 application.
Sure. Yeah. I guess in some sense there is some validity to that. I guess it's true that yep, some of the setbacks to the street and to the rear have improved. Yeah, I won't deny that. But I suppose to drill down on it, even if you were to start those, some of the setbacks have worsened, for lack of a better term, on level 7 to the street and to the rear. It's the buildings got closer to the boundaries, and on the side boundaries in particular, the minimum setbacks increased, or rather decreased 2.1 meters from an approved 3.3. So I guess maybe the deferral reason should be, or ideally now would be more specific, and that it would be those setbacks that I guess have worsened that should be addressed through a deferral or through compliance.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. The additional car bays, is it your understanding based on there's a comment by components that it could be heading towards a resolution of owning of another basement, and that's a $2 million cost?
Not necessarily. I mean, I know when we look at the breakdown of car parking, correct me if I'm wrong, but there'll be a number of bays that will be allocated to studio apartments. You know, why couldn't they be allocated to those? Then you don't need to create a new basement parking arrangement. So there is a solution with the current framework of development. It's just a commitment to actually put 2 extra bays aside, and not 2 extra bays, meeting the minimum requirements. 2 bays is a car parking base. So you'd be taking them away from studio apartments, which are traditionally small apartments, traditionally single bedroom, or it's mixed, it's bedroom and an open arrangement. So you could get away, I think, with marking that as an apartment without a bay.
Thanks.
In terms of the parking, it's my understanding, seeking confirmation. As a panel member, I've been involved with many apartments where the visitor parking is behind the security gate. It's up to those within the building to manage visitors coming and going. Owner apartment, acknowledging someone's coming and pressing a button every day. Is that your experience?
Yeah, look, I've seen both. I've seen different parking bays outside of the dock, and I've seen it inside. I've seen hybrids. So I've seen a wide variety of those options. I think.
So those two bays could, in fact, be behind the gate.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
There's already two behind the gate anyway.
Correct.
So
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So that's why I'm suggesting that you don't have to have another basement. It's just a matter of taking base away from the residential, and I think you can easily take them away from the studio apartments. So you don't have to do a whole new basement as suggested by the proponent.
Questions? Right, nothing then? Okay.
Can you just elaborate on your condition 18?
Sure.
What do you expect to have happen?
Essentially, just the.
You heard what the intent design is, and you've got at least two of those windows are directly facing the street.
Yeah. Yes,
What do you expect to happen?
I agree that the windows that are oblique to the side boundaries are not really an issue, but yeah, the window that's facing the side of on the north and the south, that's 2.5 meters from the boundary.
2.6.
2.6 meters from the boundary should be screened to a height of 1.6 meters, so whether it's sill height or exterior glazing.
On what basis?
On the basis that it'll see right into the
It's not compliance issue, is it?
a compliance issue. So as in, well, on the basis that it's the distance is just too close for a standard visual privacy perspective.
That screening that's suggested is adequate to cover that.
I maybe was a little bit unclear on the screening that's been suggested. I heard it's 900 millimeter and then.
Well, the option would be to have, if it's all essentially reads as glazed, like glazing from the outside, which is what the intention is, then a portion of that would be.
Yes, yeah.
Up to 1600.
Yes.
But only as to the ones facing the
side boundaries, yeah.
Side
Direct
the ones facing.
No, that's correct.
No further questions? Move on, thank you, John. By recommendation, so form 2. So I'm going to ask for removal of second floor. Councillor Smart, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We realise, I realise that this is form 2 and is building on previous approval, and it's not revisiting the previous approval. However, the officers have indicated that there are a number of issues that they think could be resolved and improved on, given a little bit more time. I believe that for the benefit of the amenity of the area, that these issues to do with parking need to be resolved, because any parking that's not absorbed into the allocated spaces in the building is pushed out into the street and affects the congestion in the street. So we need to make sure that these visitor spaces are adequate and accessible. And I think that it serves a few days, up to 90 days, to resolve this for the next several years, the next decade. It's a worthwhile investment to sort these minor things out. I do understand that there's a quite considerable change to the number of buildings, number of dwellings. However, given the explanation about the dual keying and the single stratas for 2 dwellings or 1 strata, I do think that there's a place for this in the future intergenerational living. I really, I suppose I take them on their word for what they're attempting to do there, and do commend that, I suppose. So yes, I would therefore move this with the deferral, so that these issues can be drummed through for the better. Thank you.
We've seen this development multiple times, and it's now being revisited, but it's been constructed in a fashion that we're actually now having to accept the stage, I suppose, of how it's been presented as studio apartments, and accepting plot ratio and accepting that I expect the panel to argue against, or some of the panel to argue against, the increasing plot ratio, whereas we still believe plot ratio is extremely important. I agree about the fact that you can't condition away. You've got to deal with it in the first instance. You can't then fix up design and amenity issues by conditioning them. I'm still concerned about the amenity of the residents themselves. This is, we're told it's a high quality area. We're told that it's housing affordability, but there's still the amenity of the existing residents in the area, although it's an upscale area. And I know it's not a debate to have again today, but it's a harsh transition to Kingsway. And therefore the setbacks really matter. The deep soil matters, and you still can have planting at the rear, but you still need to be very cognizant of the setbacks and the massing of the building. And I disagree around parking, because you can't rely on visitors parking in the streets. People like cars. We're still a high car ownership state, and people who do shift work may not be able to get public transport. People who study and then work unusual hours is becoming increasingly common. And I do think visitors too, it's a 24-hour society, so you can't say when a visitor might need a car bay. You've just got to give them an option. Otherwise, you're relying on the street and you're relying on everybody else, and it's not fair. It doesn't pass the pub test. So I think the community, there's been quite a lot of opposition to this, and the opposition remains. You can't trade this off against another one, or the one up the street, or the one in the middle at night. You've got to look at what's in front of us here. And there even was probably for expedience on the committee, there was a refusal on the table, so it was there in case anybody asked for it. We're not going back to that, but a deferral is the right way to go at the moment, so that the administration and the panel, when it comes back, can deal adequately with the shortcomings of this development. I'm not satisfied, so I'm supporting the deferral for 90 days.
Councillor, speaker against.
Whilst I understand the sentiments for the deferral, I'm not satisfied and don't support a deferral. Reasons 1, 2 and 3 in my view are principally addressed through the original application. I've got both sets of plans in front of me, the one approved and the proposal that is for the amendments, and matters in relation to a number of these elements are essentially the same as the approved plans, or setbacks greater. And where there's been variation, there's been specific information provided, for me anyway, to make an informed determination in relation to the proposal. That includes being aware of the context and the emerging character. From my perspective, the two reasons for deferral, which are 4 and dealing with parking and balconies, particularly in relation to other elements. Issues that was discussed earlier on in relation to privacy and views. I think there are way forward on these matters, and those can be managed appropriately via conditions based on the material we have before us. So I don't support deferral for the reasons that have been put forward. As I've already said, we are dealing with an amendment to an improved development, and I'm satisfied that on the material before us, those matters can be resolved.
Yes, look, there's plenty of information here for us to make a decision. There's no reason, in my view, for us to defer anything. The reasons for deferral that are put in there, as with Fanny, the first three to do with setbacks, I think we either accept that or we don't. In my view, the setbacks are mostly improved, actually, and I think that's objectively true. And I think the minor variations that there are at the top are insubstantial, I think, to me. Parking we can talk about if we get to an alternate motion. And regarding the size of balconies, interestingly, I checked the size of my balcony, one of my balconies, and I have a 2 metre by rather wide balcony, and 2 metres, especially if they've got, in this case, the minimum area 10 square metres or more. 2 metres is a perfectly acceptable, perfectly functional width for a balcony. So we can quite easily accept that as a variation. So in summary, look, there's plenty of information for us to make a decision here. There's no purpose in order to make that.
Thank you. I agree with the previous two speakers. My real concern is that the reasons for deferral are attempting to revisit matters that have already been dealt with, and that's not the purpose of the Form 2. So I believe that we do have sufficient information, and any of those matters can be dealt with through conditions. So I don't support the deferral.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put the motion for deferral. All in favour? Against? It's lost 3-2. I'm going to move to the Senate motion for approval. R13. Response we got. Second mover and second of all attacks.
Happy to move.
John,
Sorry,
I'll second. No, you move. I'll second.
I'm happy to move that.
Francesca. John, sorry, second.
Thank you. The material that we have before us, I am satisfied that a decision can be made on it. As I've already indicated, I have reviewed the material that we've been in the RAR, all the supporting documentation, including the planning framework, and have done a review against the approved plans, the Form 2 plans, as well as consideration of site context, as well as looking at development that's currently being built on the site, as well as what's actually happening in the context. These changes, from my perspective, are minor, and they don't substantially alter the development in a manner that will make it approvable. I do note, and I take the point that there, in relation to plot ratio, although the material that we have before us that's been provided in the RAR is that the change in floor space that we're dealing with as part of this application is 211 square metres, and while that brings you up to 2.91, I note that the approval that's already been granted was up to 2.79, so I'm not revisiting what's been already determined, but in the context of what is being proposed, that is a small change in the ratio from my perspective. And I also note that there were comments by the design review in relation to the proposal. So from my perspective, I'm comfortable that the proposal is appropriate in this context, and the additional number of units. I'm satisfied that that's a good outcome, a good mix of units. I think that there's always a high demand, and we'll see it increasingly in Perth for studio apartments. It is trending now for, as we are getting a more inclusive and diverse range of housing, and I do think this proposal works well. I've already referred to comments in relation to balcony site, which is 2x2, and I'm satisfied with the comments that were provided by the applicant. I also note that in review of the design details is provided, the proposal still retains, albeit in a different location, its community amenities. I know that they have changed the location of the residence gym and the amenity. They are still provided on level 1, and they both, in both instances, those provide a courtyard to create an additional functional private space for occupants within the complex, and so I'm able to support it. I would, however, at this juncture, like to make an amendment. My amendment is because I understand we have moved the amendment as, sorry, the alternate as written in the R13, and I would like to deal with condition 21. Point 4 deals with amending condition 21, and there's the wording in there. I secondly wanted to change that to a private occupation amendment. 7 car parking bays shall be provided for the complex. Visitors, satisfaction city can maintain. And I'm removing this last sentence, which is with, and I remove it in the context of the approved plan, and the plan's reference number that I'm referring to is it is level 00 ground. It is Rev C, drawing number DA021. It shows the location of visitor bays, and it actually includes 2 small bays on it. So for those reasons, I'm essentially supportive of the plan that we have in front of us, and therefore I am removing those. So I'm not sure if everyone's clear about what I've said. So what I'm moving is that prior to occupation, a minimum of 7 car parking bays shall be allocated for visitor parking use to the satisfaction of the City of Nedlands and maintained for the lifetime of the development.
All right, we have an amendment to the amended condition 21, moved by Francesca, seconded by John Syme. Do you want to say any more? No. John.
No, look, we did in questions. I think this came up in discussion. I understand the arguments for both sides. I think on balance, given the bulk of the car bays are actually in front of the security screen, and access to car bays behind the security screen is really practically limited. I think giving the building owner a bit of flexibility on that car bay internally, I think is worthwhile. So I think 7 and also 7 is sufficient.
Thank you. Speakers, please. I'll support the amendment. No, I think there are plenty of examples of visitor parking behind security gates and it operating reasonably well, but I'm happy with the explanation that's been provided by the second level. Support that. Back to you to close the debate amendment.
Thank you. My final reason, I suppose, and the final comment in relation to this is that I do am comfortable that the area is in change and there's emerging character in the area, and that with all of these text developments, that flexibility around the movement of cars associated directly with the site, noting that there is an ability for parking within the public domain, as there is in most areas around the city.
Okay, so I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? That's carried 4-1. you. I'm still with Jessica.
I have a second amendment. My amendment is in relation to new condition 18. And my amendment is to remove point 1 and yes, so my intention is that what I'm and I suppose I'm happy to clarify. We've had a lot of discussion about the design, and we have had specifically in relation to which sites were in question. Now, as I understand from today's discussion, we are not talking about the windows that face either the rear on that little windwall.
I'll make a suggestion.
I can't hear what you said.
Can I suggest, if I understand where Francesca is going, that we add a clause either at the beginning, which is the major openings directly facing the side boundaries, either to after major openings or at the end of point 2. So screen to a height of 1.6 above 30 floor level, where they directly face the lower boundary, the side boundaries.
That's exactly where I'm going based on the conversation
Yeah,
that's been had at today's meeting.
Then I think we're talking about 4 windows on each
On levels 3, 4 and 5, it's the bedroom window.
Yeah. It's only those directly facing the building.
Yes, not the ones that face forward.
Okay, can we just?
So the language would be, prior to submission of a building permit, the major openings from bedroom located on major openings directly facing the side boundary from bedrooms located on levels 3, 4 and 5 shall be.
Either setback, yeah, did you from
Well, my principle here is point 1, they're not, that's not what the application is for. So shall be taking out either. So I'll read it out for the minute taker and for the chair. Condition 5, point 5, condition 18 to be reworded or modified to the following. Prior to submission of a building permit, the major openings directly facing side boundary from bedrooms located on levels 3, 4 and 5 shall be screened to a height of 1.6 metres above finished floor level.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to.
All right. Is that understood? Okay, and I presume you're second.
yes.
Okay, so. All right.
And my reason is that we've had a lot of discussion today, quite clearly from all parties, including the officers. The view corridor from the front and rear is acceptable because it's angled and it doesn't create amenity impacts, but it is in fact the direct overlooking to the side boundary that needs a level of control. That's it.
Okay, thank you. John, a second.
Yes, look, I think we're talking about 4 windows on each level, and that's it. So that's the intention. I think that's all right. Even though I actually think 400 millimetres difference is minimal, I think I understand.
All right. Speakers against? No. All right. I'll support that as well. So Francesca. All right. I'll put that amendment. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
No.
Nothing further. So I'll have to back to John as the second.
Yes, look, I think as I said before, these are in, even though the substance of the internal use changes quite substantially with the addition of studio apartments, the form of the building externally and the nature of its impact on the external environment doesn't change at all in a meaningful way. So the setbacks, there are variations from the approved plans, but they are by and large actually increased setbacks, not decreased ones. There are some increases at the upper levels, but I think because they are at the upper levels, their effect is minimised very substantially. I think that as a and therefore, you know, quite clearly it's a Form 2 application. Quite clearly the substance substantial changes are minor in terms of the external. Internally, I think that we end up with an interesting mix of accommodations, which I think in the dynamic of where this part of the city is going is actually to its advantage. So I think these changes can be approved quite easily. And I think the development then gets further refined into what is actually very good.
Now, I support the recommendation. To me, this is quite clearly the way this locality is going. It fits within the context of what has been approved and what's likely to be approved in the future. So I think it augurs well for the future of this part of it. I'm not going to go through the technical stuff which has already been through, but I certainly acknowledge that it is minor in nature. It's a Form 2, and as I said before, it is contextually well represented. Back to Francesca to close the vote. Okay, I'll put the recommendation for approval of those amended conditions. All in favour? Against? That's carried forward. Okay, just to finish off the meeting, number of SAT, SAT matters listed there. And I'll close the meeting at 11:36. Thank you everyone for your attendance.
I had a very clear in my head. I was running out, so I will.